Frankfurt. Senator Scott, you're recognized for your questions.
First, I want to thank Chair Peters and Ranking Member Portman for holding this hearing on a critical, important topic. And plus, I mean, clearly from listening to y'all, you know the importance of this, and you're taking it seriously. So, as we know, Communist China funds technology like drones to spy on Americans and steal our data. I have proposed legislation such as the Counter-Chinese Drone Act and the American Security Drone Act to help protect national security and the privacy of American citizens. I'm proud to have led the effort to pass the American Security Drone Act in the Senate, but I think we have to go further and pass the Countering CCP Drone Act. The legislation is the next step to ensure that the federal funds from the Federal Communications Commission cannot be used to obtain communications equipment and services provided or produced by Communist China's drone company like DJI. So I've got a few questions on the reauthorization of the Preventing Emergency Threats Act. So, Mr. Weigman, is that right?
Wigman.
Wigman?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I know I practiced it. I said it the wrong way. Current law already waives certain specific provisions and prohibitions under Title 18 for action taken by DOJ, DHS against drones. This proposed bill waives all of Title 18. So why do you need to waive all of Title 18, and why not just keep the existing waivers in place?
So a couple of things. DOD and DOE have a broad Title 18 waiver, so it helps us interoperate with them if we have the same authorities they have, and we think so. That's one. Two is, while you're correct that our current authority for DHS and DOJ only extends to certain provisions in Title 18, and we've been able to use that effectively thus far. We can't predict, as this is a changing technology landscape, that other statutes could come into play in the future. So we would be back in Congress asking again if there's some new technology that's going to implicate a different statute that we weren't thinking of. So we think the cleanest approach, given that we don't think that law enforcement officials, using this technology we've all talked about here today to try to prevent threats from drones, it shouldn't be criminal at all. So it shouldn't be any criminal provision that they're subject to, rather than just a few statutes. So we just think it's a cleaner approach. We're obviously happy to discuss that with the committee if that's not their view, but we think it's cleaner to have the same authority that DOD and DOE have, which is a full sweep.
Do you have examples where you needed it? If this wasn't in place, or where have you needed this in the past?
A broader. Thus far, as I said, we've been able to work with the existing exemptions that we have from specific statutes. We can't predict necessarily whether in the future, as technology changes, whether other statutes could come into play.
Okay. So Senator Lankford talked a little bit about the prisons. So we know the use of drones over prisons is a real threat.
Yeah.
They've been used to drop drugs, weapons, and other contraband to inmates. Drug cartels, we know, are really using drones for smuggling contrabands into across the border prisons and really surveillance. How will this bill improve law enforcement efforts to counter this threat?
The counter drug threat?
Yeah, to deal with the prison fight, issues over prison. How will this bill?
On prisons,
change anything?
We already have the authority to protect our prisons, so it would extend it. Is the key. The key thing is it expires in October if we don't extend it, so we would not have the authority unless we get the extension.
Other than that, it doesn't really change.
But other than that, we have the authority in prisons, and so we're good. We just need to extend that authority for prisons.
Okay. All right, Mr. Vinograd. Under the proposed reauthorization of the Preventing Emergency Threats Act, it authorizes a limited pilot program under which DHS and DOJ, in consultation with the Department of Transportation, could designate certain state and local law enforcement entities to use counter-drone detection and mitigation authorities. Can you talk about the selection process for this pilot program and how state and local entities would be selected? And by the way, have you talked to agencies in Florida?
Senator, thank you. I'll turn to my colleague from the Department of Justice in a moment. What we are seeking in this legislation is two things for state, local, tribal, and territorial partners. Number one is the ability for SLTT partners, excuse my acronym, to engage in detection of drones or UAS. In addition to that, and I should say compliant with all federal standards and safeguards. Right. In addition to that, what we are seeking is a 6-year pilot program for SLTT partners to engage in mitigation. That selection process would be an interagency process. These individuals would comply with federal standards and certifications. They would use equipment from an authorized equipment list that's been coordinated with the FAA and FCC. And we believe that this is critical, such that SLTT partners, as the first responders on the ground in Florida and elsewhere, would be able to take urgently needed action to detect and mitigate drone threats. And I will turn to my colleague from the department.
Yeah, and I'm going to look, if it's okay, in the back row to see if we've been talking with anyone in Florida about the potential. Yes, we have.
Is that typically through what, the sheriff's departments or police?
Daytona, I'm hearing that we have talked to them about this. So it's going to be, as we select cities around the country to participate in the program, it's going to be their level of interest, right, of people we already have a
It's
working
really how
group,
much they're going to drive.
their expertise and so forth, and if they would apply, and we'll see how that process works. We haven't exactly figured out what the criteria are or how we're going to select jurisdictions to do it, but I imagine it would be in locations all over the country and build up.
Do any of you, you know what I talked about it with DJI, the drones, do you all have thoughts about whether we ought to just blanket outlaw the ability for a Chinese company to be able to sell drones in this country? Or whether the federal government ought to be able to buy them or not? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
From the department's perspective, we share your concerns about China generally. And Chinese manufactured drones. So Senator, DHS has issued guidance internally that prohibits the procurement of small UAS manufactured by foreign countries. There are some limited circumstances in which waivers may be granted, but generally we share your concern about Chinese manufactured drones.
Yeah, so we're working, the problem is that right now, as you know, they dominate the market.
Yeah.
And so we're working.
Down some.
What's that? We have
down
some.
a little bit, but not
They've got a
enough.
huge chunk of the market, and
Yeah.
so if we need to use drones for law enforcement purposes,
Yeah.
they're kind of the main game. We were working to transition away from that. So it's just, again, no, there's impatience, it's a question of time. And in the interim, we're taking steps to mitigate whatever risks, supply chain risks or others from use of the drones, but eventually we just want to transition away from it. So the waivers that Sam mentioned are necessary for that purpose so that we can continue, they do serve a useful purpose for all manner of things that we do. It's not ideal, but we're trying to transition away from them is how I would say it.
From the FAA's perspective, we're really responsible for the integration of drones into the national airspace and testing of the drones to ensure the safety as they are integrated, but we don't have a position on the purchasing of or acquiring.
Okay. Mr. Peters, I got one quick question. Ms. Vinograd, did you see this stuff that came out in Ukraine that DJI drones were being tracked? Have you guys looked into that at all, or is that classified? Do you know?
I have seen that, and I'd be glad to follow up in a closed hearing.
Okay,
for that.
yeah, that'd be great. I'd love to learn what happened on there.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Scott. Senator Rosen, you're recognized for your questions.
Well, thank you, Chairman Peters. Appreciate you holding the hearing, and I appreciate all of you being here today and what you've been working on. And I want to focus on protecting